Title: A Margin of Error. Year: 142,500,000. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the subterranean city of Vierx, everything was precise. The walls shimmered with data streams. Footsteps triggered harmonic pulses that adjusted ambient light. Meals arrived at ideal temperatures. Conversations were scored for linguistic clarity. Crime was statistically impossible. So when the breath stealer committed one, it was not flawed, it was a message. He left no trail, only anomalies. A miscalibration, a skewed angle, the breath caught an event. Inspector Rena, known as the Starbound Pilgrim, was tasked with finding him, a relic of an older order. She had left Vierx once long enough to learn that disorder had its own rhythm. The first clue was etched beneath the misaligned panel. Where your fear points, the soul is already watching. Chapter 2. Rena began to see the fractures. A child's song misaligned with the city's harmonic grid. A gardener's wall cracked not by force, but by silence. A poet arrested for rhyming imperfectly. She tracked the breath stealer by his absences, places where Vierx's code faltered. What she found were not crimes, but interruptions. People laughing off beat, kissing before schedule, painting outside bounds. The breath stealer wasn't stealing life. He was returning it. And Vierx, perfect, smooth, cold, was cracking beneath its own insistence. She confronted him in the unused southern wing, where dust dared to linger. He wore no mask, no weapon, only a smile. You came, he said. Most never noticed the flaw, but you followed it. Chapter 3. Rena didn't arrest him. She listened. Together they rewrote portions of the city's algorithm, not to erase perfection, but to loosen its grip. A new sector was opened, the improvisation wing. Citizens were encouraged quietly, subtly to try, to fail, to risk. The breath stealer vanished again. Or perhaps he stayed, in every misbeat and smudged line, now engraved into the lintel of Vierx's southern gate. Where your fear points, the soul is already. Watch it, hesitate, then follow, and begin to breathe. Title: The Flame That Remembers. Year: 142,307,692.3. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The library of the heroes was sealed in ash. Once the greatest store of knowledge across the Emberlands, it now smoldered beneath a curse that left lungs blackened and minds fragmented. Only one dared guard it. The ash-lunged prophet, whose breath came with pain but whose memory remained untouched. She knew the truth wasn't destroyed, only hidden. In came the broken champion. He had fled a war he refused to finish. Branded a deserter, branded a coward, but in his hands he carried a shard of the flame codex, lost scripture rumored to awaken dormant wisdom. You seek redemption? The prophet asked. He nodded, then breathed through the pain. Redemption begins with a single, trembling yes. Chapter 2. They descended together into the grey vaults. Dust whispered secrets. Shadows clung like regrets. Each chamber held traps not for the body, but for the soul. False absolution, hollow pride, tempting shortcuts. The champion faltered more than once. He remembered only glory. The prophet made him remember failure. You left your sword, she reminded him. What did you pick up instead? Shame, he said. Good, she replied. It means your hands are finally open. They reached the heart of the vault, where the last codex ember pulsed. To awaken it, one must share truth. The champion told his story. The flame rose. Chapter 3. The library burned again, but this time with light. Not destruction, but restoration. Books reformed. Voices echoed once lost. The ash-lunged prophet smiled as her lungs filled not with ash but clarity. The champion stayed. He did not reclaim title or power. He shelved books. He listened. The Emberlands changed, not through battle, but breath. Now inscribed in the codex is rebinding, visible only by emberlight. Redemption begins with a single, trembling, yes, breathe, speak, learn, and light the way for others. Title: The Ripple Beneath the Earth. Year: 142,115,384.6. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. They buried the bones beneath the prayer field. No one spoke of it. No one ever returned. But the roots remembered, and so did she, the voice of the moon's shadow. Not quite priestess, not quite outcast. A whisperer. They called her a heretic, others warned. She wore silence like a veil and walked the borderlands listening, and in the listening she heard the plague, not of blood, but of forgetting, until one night beneath the half-moon the ground split open without sound, and the plague of the possible rose. It took no shape, only suggestion. Faces almost remembered, futures nearly lived, fears yet unnamed. The villager awoke screaming, but the voice only knelled. The unknown may terrify, she whispered, but it's also the only place revelation lives. Chapter 2. They asked her to stop it. She didn't. Instead, she asked each person what they'd buried, not in the soil, and themselves. A merchant recalled the stole coin. A mother confessed a song she refused to sing. A boy wept over a friend he betrayed for a moment of praise. The plague fed on silence, but it choked on confession. The ground trembled less each day, and the wind began to carry voices again, not screams, stories. Chapter 3. The field is still there, still scarred, but blooming each year. They plant memory flowers, one for every confession made that saved another. At the center, a stone marker, no names, just an inscription. The unknown may terrify, but it is also the only place revelation lives. So speak, and let the buried bloom. Title: The Blueprint of Healing. Year: 141,923,076.9. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The city of Marose was a marvel of architecture and ordered, every building a symbol of success. Every corridor lined with awards, data plaques, and certificates of personal excellence. No one remembered who built it, only that it was perfect. The architect of breath wandered those clean lines, unseen. She was never credited, never named in the city's lore. She had carved balance into the very veins of Marose until they scrubbed out silence, play, rest, and her. One day she returned, to no fanfare, just a whisper in the air ducts, and to meet the archivist of dreams. He had recorded what the city forgot, knows on sleeplessness, love deferred, minds cracked beneath flawless marble. He met her on a rooftop, garden overgrown with weeds. "You still breathe," he said. "Barely," she answered. "And there's still time." Chapter 2. They built a room, just one, not for work, not for planning, a room to cry in, sit in, be in. It spread like a secret, like a sigh long withheld. People found it without knowing why. They left lighter. City leaders demanded its removal. "We can't measure it," they said. "It contributes nothing." But the archivist released a report. "A rise in productivity, in health, in dreams. Data doesn't lie," he said. "Proof may wound," said the architect, "but it is the only blade that heals." Still the order came. Demolish. So she stayed in the room and waited. Chapter 3. They never demolished it. The wrecking crew sat down inside. One wept. Another laughed for the first time in months. Soon the city restructured not its buildings, but its values. The architect vanished again, but her breath lingered in pauses between meetings, in rooftop gardens left untamed, now engraved in the doorway to the original room. Truth may wound, but it is the only blade that heals. Enter, exhale, remember who you are beneath the perfect. Title: The Fire Between Us. Year: 141,730,769.2. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The sky over the walled province hadn't changed in a century. Always gray, always humming. Inside the walls, people kept to themselves, not because they wanted to, but because they'd learned the cost of trust. Every relationship was a calculated risk. Every kindness a potential liability. The survivor of ruin remembered when it hadn't been this way. When voices carried across balconies and children drew chalk messages between alley bricks. Now she kept her head down and carried her heatstone in silence, until the archivist of Ash showed up with a flame lighter. Not paper, not fire. Flickering memory, handwritten in light. It said one thing: meet me where we first stopped running. Fears gain muscle every mile you run from them. Chapter 2. They met in the old library vault, once a monument to free thought, now sealed, buried under propaganda and censor drones. The survivor hadn't seen the archivist in 7 years, not since she had chosen exile over silence, not since the riot, the burnings, the betrayals. They did not embrace. They simply lit a fire between them, not for warmth, for revelation. Each brought a truth the other had hidden, her shame, his guilt, their broken promise. "I thought you left because of me," she said. "I left because I couldn't stay without becoming like them," he replied. Then they both wept, and the walls inside them cracked. Chapter 3. The fire they lit didn't stay in the vault. It spread not with smoke, but with story. People found themselves leaving doors open longer, passing more than just goods, passing glances, greetings, fragments of old songs. No one said the province was healed, but something had shifted. The survivor of ruin planted a signal beacon on the vault's rooftop. The archivist carved words into its base. Fears gain muscle every mile you run from them, but when met, they burn away and feed the fire between us. Title: The Hall of Hollow Whispers. Year: 141,530,461.5. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Deep beneath the ruined chapel of Ceraloon, the Hall of Hollow Whispers waited, once a place of devotion. It had become something else, twisted by prayers unanswered, vows broken. Pilgrims called it cursed, scholars called it irrelevant. But the one who listens heard its call. She came alone, lantern trembling in hand, flame struggling against the cold that wasn't cold. Her only companion was a moth that followed her from the chapel, flickering through the dark like a question. Her purpose. It silenced the voice she had heard since childhood, one that spoke her fears in her own voice, with no mercy. The path ahead doesn't ask for perfection, only presence. Chapter 2. Every echo in the hall was hers. Her first failure, her worst thought, her secret envy. She walked deeper. At a cracked altar she saw it. The moth to the flame, a figure made of light and wounds, wings of parchment, eyes full of fire and memory. "I am you," it said. "No," she replied. "You are what I ran from." It smiled and stepped forward. She did not flee. She did not fight. She stood and whispered her truth. The hall trembled, not from destruction, but release. Chapter 3. She emerged not purified, but transformed. The voice no longer echoed, it harmonized. Now the chapel is rebuilt, not to glorify gods, but to house the fears of the faithful so they may face them with presence, not shame. Pilgrims come not to be saved, but to see themselves. And in a chamber beneath, carved into the wall where the hall first turned, the path ahead doesn't ask for perfection, only presence. Enter, face, flame, and listen. Title: The Echo of a Name. Year: 141,346,153.8. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Riddle Master wandered from village to village, never repeating his name, not because he was mysterious, because he had forgotten it. They called him things: trickster, sage, shadow, speaker, but none fit. None stirred memory. He wasn't searching for fame or followers. He was searching for the truth he once whispered into a child's ear, a truth that would return his name to him. In a dust-bitten town with cracked fountains and bitter crops, he helped repair a leaking cistern. Not because they asked, because it was leaking. A girl saw him and brought him bread. That night, a name flickered at the edge of his dreams. Not his name, but hers, and it glowed. Chapter 2. The hunger that wakes was an old force, older than law, older than fire, fed on neglect, thrived in cities forgotten by maps and memory. The Riddle Master entered one such place with a riddle. What starts with a whisper weighs less than ash, but rebuilds broken bones. The people stared. Then one offered tea. Another shared dried fruit. No one answered the riddle, but the hunger began to recede, because the answer was kindness. They didn't know it. They lived it, and in doing so, they pushed back the hunger until it starved. Chapter 3. The Riddle Master returned to the town with the cracked fountain. The girl was older now, standing at the edge of the square, handing out bread like it was prophecy. She called him by name, and he turned, not because she was right, but because her voice made it true. He smiled. She laughed, and somewhere deep beneath the mountain, the hunger groaned and slunk back into its hole. On a stone by the fountain, someone had etched, "Conquering the world means nothing if you've misplaced your name. Remember, and feed what is starving, even if it's only a name." Title: The Bridge Beneath the Silence. Year: 143,046.2. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. No one crossed the ash line anymore. Once a river of light between two great cities, Talanos and Myre, it had become a wasteland after the Sundering. Politics had calcified into walls. Technology diverged. Stories twisted into weapons. Then came the goat-faced wanderer. He wore no banner. His name was hissed as an omen in Myre, laughed off as a myth in Talanos. But wherever he passed, people remembered how the speaker crossed silence. He walked the ash line, and on the third night, he vanished. That same dawn, a message appeared etched into the obsidian markers that once marked borders. What you conceal doesn't disappear. It becomes your weight. Chapter 2. In Myre, the echo eater stirred. She was an archivist of pain, keeper of memory scars. She fed on silence, on what people refused to say. Her eyes glowed faintly whenever secrets passed unsaid. She crossed the ash line, not to find the wanderer, but to confront the silence he had stirred. On the cracked road between cities, she found a trail of items laid carefully. A child's flute, a bitcoin, a page from an old treaty. Echoes. She felt them burn inside her. She began to weep not from sorrow, but understanding. And in that moment, a voice's voice whispered, "You cannot hold what you will not face." Chapter 3. The cities awoke, not in celebration, but in reckoning. Small groups crossed the ash line to rebuild a neutral zone. Children of both cities played together, watched by guards who slowly learned to set down their arms. The Echo Eater became their guide, not because she knew peace, but because she knew the cost of silence. The ghost-faced wanderer was never seen again, or perhaps he became the wind. Now, in the new Ashline Commons, a stone bridge arches above black glass sand. On its center stone, carved by flame, what you conceal doesn't disappear. It becomes your weight. Name it. Speak it. Cross. Title. The Quiet Victory. Year 140,961,538.5. Era. Cradle of Titans. Author. Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Scholar of Silence was once the loudest debater in the Citadel of Echoes. She had bested every rival, torn apart every flawed argument, and risen so high that no one dared challenge her anymore. And in that silence, she began to crumble. What good is being right? She wondered, when no one dares to respond. So she left. She walked into the lowlands, where the skulls were small, the questions simpler, and the pain more visible. There she found the flame of identity, a boy who had forgotten his own name after his village was razed. He couldn't argue. He only wept. She stayed, not to teach, but listen. Chapter 2. They never spoke of love, but it was there, in the way she helped him rebuild stories from charcoal ruins, and how he shared a single boiled egg without hesitation. She came to understand. Love is not agreement, not admiration. It is the decision to witness someone fully and remain. She began collecting the silent stories of the forgotten, archiving not facts, but feelings unresolved, unspoken, and true. Her former colleagues sent letters, asking when she would return to the arena. She never replied. She had found a new arena, one without applause, one with real stakes. Chapter 3. Years later, the flame of identity stood before a crowd. Now a teacher himself. She sat in the back, her robe tattered, her hands ink-stained. No one recognized her, but she didn't need them to. Love had already named her, and love does not forget. On the foundation stone of his new school, he had etched a quote, "When you win too often, you forget what it means to fight. But when you love, you remember what it means to stay." Silence. Light. Begin again. Title. The Parable of the Hollow Clock. Year 140,769,230.8. Era. Cradle of Titans. Author. Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the city of Calem, progress was measured in pendulums. Every thought ticked. Every innovation taught. Efficiency was worshipped. Spontaneity was treasonous. No one questioned the clock. It wasn't just a device, it was a way of life. A cathedral of years. And came the child who never grows. She wandered in barefoot, giggling at equations, painting on blueprints. She wore no badge, held no license. She asked questions no one dared speak aloud. Why is the clock so afraid of skipping a beat? Security tried to remove her, but the gears stopped turning. The clock ceased, and in the silence, a voice echoed across the plaza. What you resist hearing is often what you most need to remember. Chapter 2. The architect of time was summoned. He had designed the clock's inner sanctum, its soul, some said. He had exiled himself after refusing to shave 6 seconds from the workday cycle. He arrived not with tools, but with a broom. He swept the gears clean, whistling off key. The child sat beside him. They spoke of useless things. Sandcastles, imaginary friends, why laughter always shows up uninvited, as they did. The clock twitched. Mudry started reconsider. The city panicked, but no disasters followed. In fact, flowers began to grow between the cobbles of the Time Plaza. Chapter 3. Calem did not collapse. It changed. A new philosophy emerged. Timelessness through trust. The clock still ticked, but it listened too. Every 10th chime was silent, inviting contemplation. The child never grew, but she became legend. The architect returned to exile only now. It was a garden, and beneath the clock's new crystal casing, etched with a crooked finger, reads, "What you resist hearing is often what you most need to remember." Pause, laugh, and let time miss a step. Title. The Listening Shape. Year 140,576,923.1. Era. Cradle of Titans. Author. Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The city of Freyline was engineered to perfection. Symmetry in the towers, precision in the laws, uniformity in speech, dress, and action. The tear catcher lived in a 10-by-10 dwelling unit that matched every other until the day she cried. Not a sob, just a single tear. It fell onto the floor and did not vanish. It shaped itself into a spiral. She stared at it for an hour, and for the first time she disobeyed the schedule. She walked past her assigned route. She followed the spiral's echo down into the archive bunkers, where forbidden art and heresies slept. There she found the voice beneath the veil, and nothing was ever the same. Chapter 2. The voice was not a person. It was many. Old recordings, shards of resistance, echoes of philosophers long erased from the ministry index. But in whispered truth no code could simulate. When you stop forcing life to fit your mold, it said, it begins to speak. The tear-catcher began to listen. She unlearned. She unscheduled. She wept for every citizen who had accepted order in place of insight. And then she began to plant questions in the schedules of others. Just one line, printed on meal packets, tram tokens, sleep audits. Do you still recognize your own voice? Some deleted them. Others woke up screaming. But some cried and remembered. Chapter 3. Rebellion didn't come in flames. It came in shapes. Irregular gardens. Asymmetrical song. Curved words and graffiti that spiraled rather than marched. The ministry cracked down, but it was too late. The mold had cracked, and through those cracks the city heard itself for the first time. The tear-catcher vanished. Some say she was recycled. Others say she became the veil itself. But across Freyline, etched on the only curved wall in the entire city, the message remains. When you stop forcing life to fit your mold, it begins to speak, and sometimes it speaks your name. Title: The Covenant, Autumn. Year: 140,384,615.4. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The freeholds of Thalen had no kings, no clocks, no chains. Its people wandered by stars, not schedules. Oaths were optional. Love was ungoverned. So, when the keeper of eternal autumn built a garden no one asked for, they called it tyranny. But still, the trees bore fruit. Still, travelers rested there. Still, wounds seemed to close faster in its shade. Then came the keeper of forgotten rights, long exiled, long silent. She arrived not with judgment, but with her own seeds. She planted none, only watched. You've made a tether, she said, to a people who don't want roots. The eternal keeper smiled. Freedom isn't rootless, she replied. It's a garden you choose to tend. Chapter 2. The rights keeper stayed. She watched couples fall in love beneath the arbor, watched them leave the next day. She watched a thief return stolen bread, just to leave a poem in its place. She watched a girl bring fire every week, though no one asked. Slowly, she began to help, clearing underbrush, marking trails, naming winds. One night, she turned to the eternal keeper. Why does this matter? They still leave. The answer came as dusk flickered through orange leaves. Because they return. Because they know someone stayed. Chapter 3. When war licked at Thalen's borders, it passed over the garden. Both sides had rested there once. Both sides remembered the taste of shared silence. The garden became a refuge, then a library, then a place of vows. Not forced, freely offered. Responsibility, not restriction. Now, at the arch where the orchard meets the wild, the twin keepers carved a single phrase into the stone, refusing to settle for rights, the law, in your bones, and each other. Choose again, and stay when it matters. Title: The Forgotten Edge. Year: 140,192,307.7. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The exiled general had once led the eastern legions of the valleys. 1,000 soldiers had marched under her banner, their shields painted with the crest of unity. But that was before the uprising in the low reaches, before she spoke out for the displaced, before silence became her punishment. Now she walked the forgotten trails beyond the city walls, where maps frayed and names faded. She wasn't seeking redemption. She was seeking someone who remembered what justice looked like, a half-burned outpost. She met the lone veteran, one arm gone, one eye bandaged, both hands busy digging a trench for wild seedlings. They spoke little, but they understood each other perfectly. Chapter 2. The High Council had walled off the low reaches, not for protection, but for shame. The marginalized were told to be grateful for their exclusion, but the exiled general remembered their faces. She and the lone veteran began gathering stories, names of the vanished, songs of the silenced, maps etched into the dirt by shaking fingers. Together, they rebuilt not armies, but networks, caravans, messages smuggled in food sacks, water-sharing packs. The wilderness became a web, one spun from pain, yes, but also from promise. Chapter 3. When the storms came, and the towers of the valleys cracked under their own weight. The low reaches stood, rooted, resilient. And when the exiled general led the relief effort, no one remembered her title, only her face. She didn't demand statues. She planted trees, and when asked why she returned, she whispered, "There are endings keeps you from beginnings." Her name was never restored in the scrolls, but among the scattered and scarred, she became something greater, the one who walked back, so others could rise forward.